Postcard, which is the book that Larry will be discussing shortly. I also wanted to introduce you. You may not know Larry Feldman. I've known him for 3 decades. This young man here, my daughter and Keith were classmates. And so many birthday parties and many rescues between our families. And I'm so happy that he has agreed to speak not just about a novel, fiction, but a historical novel and a very personal novel for Larry, because he and his brother Dick, sister-in-law Beth, have traveled to France to learn about the death of a great man in the Holocaust. And so he will speak about the parallels between this book and his own experience. I do want to say just quickly that on your table is a list of our presentations for the rest of 2024. And I hope you'll come again. We have a lot of fun listening. And finally, Larry is Professor Emeritus from the Department of Mathematics at IMD, as is his wife, Margaret. And he's now serving the community as a board member of the Indiana Free Libraries Board. So, welcome, Larry. Thank you.
Thanks, Sue. Thank you. I'd like to start by thanking my brother and my brother Dick, who's there, my sister-in-law Beth, who just got introduced a little bit, my son Keith, of course, and I can't forget somebody else there. What's her name again? So thank you, Margaret, and of course I want to thank the New Century Club for inviting me. I really appreciate that. And I'll try and leave 10 minutes or so at the end for your comments. I think we'll have a lot to talk about in the last 10 minutes. So a French woman opened her mailbox in the 1990s and found this postcard. On it was nothing but 4 names. You can see here. The 4 names were Ephraim, her grandfather, her grandmother Emma, her Aunt Noemi, the 3rd one, and Uncle Jacques. These were the 4 people from her family, this Ephraim, Emma, Noemi, and Jacques, who died at the hands of the Nazis. Nothing else was written on the postcard. On the front was a picture, you can see over there, of the famous Palais Garnier, which is where the Phantom of the Opera lived. I don't know if it still lives there today, but it's also where an infamous Nazi exhibition about the Jews took place. The goal of that exhibit was to deflect towards the Jews the misery that the French people were feeling under the Nazis. So, who wrote the postcard and why? Why did it appear in such a mysterious way? And the answer is, I'm not telling you. You should read it yourself. I hope you do. But these questions kind of envelop the whole book. The author spoke of her fear that she would never get an answer. She had no idea when she was working on this book whether she would get an answer to these questions. The book would have been interesting enough if it was just about these mysteries. But it's also much more than that. It's a telling of many years of 20th century European history through very personal eyes. It's a tale of anti-Semitism, of the hardships of immigrants, of love and of hate. This is the author on the left. This is the author's mother on the right. The author had published a family history that was used extensively for this book. She had done a great deal of research, but the 2 of them later became detectives. They worked together to find more bits of information. They even hired a handwriting expert to see if they could get some clues from the handwriting. The mother here is my generation, and there's a pretty close match between the generations. So the author is in Keith's generation. So I'm going to go back and forth a little bit between stories about the book's family and about my family. And at first I thought it'd be fun to confuse you about that. And then I thought maybe I'd give you these clues here. You can see down here. So if you're confused, look in the bottom left corner, and hopefully that'll help. So we'll return to the book later, of course, but there were a bunch of things that had to happen for a reunion that we'll talk about in just a minute. I think I counted 8. You know, as a math person, I've got to count everything. So the first thing that had to happen for this kind of, what you'll see, this reunion, was my third cousin, Steve Taubman, who created this massive family tree. Can you imagine this? 5,333 people? It makes me feel kind of small. You know, I'm just this tiny little person in this whole massive group. Okay. The second thing that had to happen was a friend of mine thought it'd be fun to put together a big binder of family history for me. And when she did that, all of a sudden this came up. And nobody in our family had any idea about this, that we actually had a great aunt who died in Auschwitz. So this was a shock to me. This was a shock to our whole family to suddenly find out that we had someone who died in Auschwitz. At first, we all read so much about the Holocaust, but to actually know that somebody in that close relation was kind of a shock. When you think of Dick and Beth's grandchildren, their relation to me is the same as my relation to this person. So it's really quite close. Margaret, Keith, and I traveled to Auschwitz after this. I wouldn't recommend that if you want to feel happy at the end of the day. It was difficult to see the spot where Sarah, this person, left the cattle car with another 1,000 people with her, and only 100 or so of that 1,000 made it to the work camps. The rest went right to the ovens. So that's putting a damper on it here a little bit. So I wanted to solve some mysteries also. In addition to the book working on solving mysteries, I wanted to solve a mystery. Of course, why did she not come to America? Most of the rest of the family, her siblings, came to America. Why didn't she come to America? And why was she arrested and taken to the camps? Okay. My journey to solve these things began here, not with the Northern Lights, so I thought I'd just kind of sneak in a picture of the Northern Lights. It was pretty wonderful. Go ahead. And this is us flying into Paris. This was Margaret and I took a trip together. So we went to on the last day of our trip in March, we went to the Memorial de la Shoah and saw my great aunt's name on their memorial wall. You can see it circled there. Her married name was Gross, and she had actually changed her name to Suzanne for I won't get into all the reasons why she did that. But this was the third thing that had to happen for this kind of strange and unusual reconciliation that took place. Go ahead. The other thing was I saw, just as a side note, I looked on this massive wall and found 21 Feldmans. That was a little creepy. The fourth thing that had to happen was when we were at this memorial, we went to the reference desk, and spoke with them. And while we were talking with them, this person, Laura Paoli, was searching on her computer, and she discovered that there was somebody else who was looking for this Sarah Gross. That there was a mysterious person who was also interested in this same person. So we have to really thank her. The fifth thing was that she did all that research work. The sixth thing was that she said, send a message in French right away, which I did right away. So I give myself credit for number 6, that I immediately forwarded a message. And then Margaret and I were at the Eiffel Tower having some champagne. She climbed up the steps. I found the elevator. And while we were up there, I got an email, a response from someone. So this was the 7th thing, that the email from these people were sent right away. So what that led to was this person, Jean-Luc, immediately leaving work, picking up his mother, Nicole, and organizing a dinner for us on our very last day in France. And this was the first meeting of the French sides of the family and the U.S. side since 1907, 116 years. So I think it's hopefully, as you'll see, it didn't take another 116 years for us to meet again. Okay. They organized all kinds of events for us, all kinds of dinners, and here's a party they organized for us. This was later on when my Dick and Beth and I, 6 months later, we decided to go to France and really spend some time with these people. We'd had the one dinner in March, but now it was time to really spend some time and really get to know them. The three of us speak quite good French, although Dick was good at correcting my grammar every so often. He was my reference. And we spoke almost entirely in French with them. I thought they would want to speak some English, but no, they were happy to speak French. We don't want to deal with that disgusting English language. We spent a lot of time sharing historical documents. We theorized about our common ancestors' motivations. A lot of course, eating and drinking, as only the French know how to do. And we just getting to know each other. The joy you see here, it was real. It was really a joyful moment. Nicole, the person here, who was the person that I sent the email to, she said she was convinced that she would die without ever knowing what happened to her American cousins. We were just as excited as they were. We spent a week in Paris meeting relatives. Then we moved on to the center of France, in an obscure farmhouse, far away from any cities. And then we moved on to Cannes, the famous film center. Go ahead. And we spent a final week back in Paris. Okay. So this will be on the final exam. We met all these relatives in the yellow, plus quite a few more of the grandchildren. And so this starts from, here's me and Dick. You go up to our father, our grandfather here, and then you move over to his sister, and then these people were all descendants of my grandfather's sister. Okay, I want to go through these quite quickly. Just this is more than just a travelogue here. But this was, typical presentation, small portion size, but lots of courses. After you're totally full with all these courses, then they come out with the cheese at the end, and the pastries, of course. Okay, on the left is the famous Musée d'Orsay, and you can see the clock tower here. We were fortunate that one of the people on that sketch before works at the Musée d'Orsay, and she got us in on a Monday when they were closed. So this place that typically has thousands of people, we were there with like 20 people in the whole place. So if you see that clock tower, here we were on the other side of the clock tower, looking out. Okay. They had a special exhibit on Van Gogh. Okay. Next, we spent several days with our cousin Roland's family in the center of the country here. That was the view out of my window. You don't see that view much in Paris. Go ahead. And this is my second cousin, Roland, picking the mushrooms for the meal that night, and here are the mushrooms being cooked up. Those are massive mushrooms, aren't they? Okay. So on the top, do you notice any family resemblance? We're all wearing our bald hair wigs there. And This is the one who organized that dinner back in March, and that's another second cousin. This is sort of a typical conversation, a typical moment from our 3 weeks. Roland was quite a fascinating person, really interesting guy. He had a strong regional accent, but which was fascinating to try and decode. Okay, and then we went to Cannes. We were sitting right on the sand on the Mediterranean, almost on the sand, meeting some more family. So we also, at the very end, went back to the memorial where this whole journey started in March. And we met this same person, Laura, who had been the kind of a hero who really did the research and then also sent the email immediately to the family. So let me return to the, then the last night in November, we went back to the restaurant where we had that first encounter and had our last dinner there, so that we kind of completed the circle. Okay. So we notice on the bottom left of the author's family. Now we're back to the book. The question is, why did they started the book in Moscow, and the question is, why did they end up in Paris? In Moscow, Anne's great-great-grandfather, Anne is the author, was doing well as a trader of goods, in spite of barriers to Jews at the time. But in 1919, he saw a new wave of anti-Semitism. He decided it was time to flee. He bought an orange farm in Palestine, but no one else in the family wanted to go there. His son, Ephraim, one of the people who was on the postcard who died in Auschwitz, was a member of the Mensheviks, which, if you know any Russian Revolution history, the Bolsheviks fought the Mensheviks, the Bolsheviks won. It was not a good idea to be a Menshevik in 1919. At the same time, there was a group called the Black Hundreds, an extreme right monarchist group who was spreading reports of a Jewish conspiracy. So they were getting it from both sides, from political and religious. The police actually came to his door to arrest him, and his wife sort of confused them and talked about her pregnancy and was able to convince them to go away. Ephraim, with his wife Emma and 3 children, thought about going to America. And here's a quote: "Cowboys and Indians, America. No thank you," thought the Rabinowitz children. "Its landscapes are too remote, impossible to picture." Another quote: "Avoid Paris, Berlin, and Prague," Ephraim emphasized seriously. "All the respectable places in society have been occupied for generations. In cities like that, you'll never establish yourself. You'll be seen as either too clever or not clever enough." Latvia, however, had just become an independent country, one where Jews could settle without being subject to laws restricting their commercial activity. Once they arrived in Latvia, they were put in prison for a few days, quote, "due to administrative formalities," a sign of things to come for them and similar to what often happens to immigrants everywhere. Their next step 2 here, was to go, after they got to Latvia, was to go down here to Palestine. Ephraim developed quite a thriving caviar business in Riga, and he began inventing devices. I looked online, and there's still a lot of patents that the author's great-grandfather has online. You can find. One of them was for something to do with a bread machine. So it's possible I've gotten some benefits out of that, because Margaret uses a bread machine all the time. His wife, Emma, another one who died, was really enjoying it there, took in piano students, but things turned sour. There's a pattern here. It's like how wonderful things are, and then you hear the word but. But the Latvians were jealous of Ephraim's business, and the neighbors complained about the disruption from the piano students. So they traveled through Lithuania, Poland, Hungary, then Romania to get a ship to Palestine. Ironically, it took 40 days. Which, I think I've heard that number somewhere. So I feel like I'm not spoiling for this if you're planning to read the book, because I'm leaving out dozens of fascinating details. Finally, they went from Palestine to France. It turned out they were just dirt poor. Their grandfather, who was living in Palestine with the orange grove, was really struggling, and it was like just a kind of grimy life there for them at that time. And Ephraim's brother had become a bit movie actor in France. He had to change his name to do that. And they kind of missed European life. So here's a quote from the book about the choice of France. Why France? Ephraim said, quote, "Happy as a Jew in France. Isn't that the expression? The place has always been good to us. Think of Dreyfus, the whole country rising up to defend a humble Jewish nobody." His father responded, "Only half the country, son. Don't forget the other half." France was seen as a more tolerant country than others. In fact, about 3/4 of the French Jews survived the Holocaust, much more than in neighboring countries. With all this travel, the author's grandmother, 6-year-old Miriam, now knew Russian, German, Hebrew, some Arabic, and Yiddish, and soon to be some French. So they had really been getting around. The quality of life for the author's family in Paris pre-war, as in Moscow and Riga, they adapted to their new circumstances and flourished. Here's a quote. "The future seemed full of promise. Miriam, at 13, was already picturing herself studying at the Sorbonne once she passed her final exams. In the evening, she wove tales for Noémie of the life awaiting them, the smoky bistros of the Latin Quarter, the Sainte Geneviève library. Both sisters had wholly absorbed the idea that it was up to them to fulfill the destiny their mother had been denied." But anti-Semitism reared its ugly head from time to time. In 1933, quote, "A pupil at Fenelon, their primary school, was having a tea party for her birthday, and all the little girls in her class had been invited, all but Noémie. She came home from school flushed with anger. Ephraim was even more indignant than his daughter. The celebration was being thrown by a venerable French family at their grand home in the 16th arrondissement. Quote, "Knowledge is the true essence of nobility," Ephraim told his daughters. "We'll go and visit the Louvre, while those little madams are stuffing themselves with cakes." Still fuming, he set off towards the Place du Carrousel with the girls. On the Pont des Arts, a man abruptly grabbed his arm, and he tensed, ready to fight. But the man, he quickly realized, was an old friend from the Socialist Revolutionary Party in Moscow, who he hadn't seen in almost 15 years. "I thought you moved to Germany during the trials." "I did, but I left and came to France a month ago with my wife and children. Things are difficult for us in Germany, you know." The man mentioned a fire that had ravaged the Reichstag building, home of the German parliament, a few days prior. Communists and Jews had been blamed for setting it, of course. The party now controlling the Reichstag, the National Socialist Workers' Party, was, he said, deeply anti-Semitic. It's interesting that they were just finding out about this at this time. "They want to ban Jews from working in any civil service profession. All Jews. I can't believe you didn't know." That night, Ephraim discussed the encounter with Emma. He told his wife, "But as I recall, that fellow had a habit of panicking about every little thing." He said, so as not to frighten her. So many were downplaying the dangers. So now we've got the yellow thing in the corner. My family started in Romania, and my Aunt Lil shared a bedroom with her mother, who would wake up in the middle of the night screaming that the Cossacks or some group like that was coming. She had these nightmares in the middle of the night. Oh, that's when you have nightmares, isn't it? Usually. I looked at Wikipedia, and they said around 1900, which is about when my family left Romania, quote, "Jews were not allowed to settle in the countryside, and they were relocated, those that had done so. So if you're in the countryside, you got relocated, while declaring many Jewish urban immigrants to be vagrants and expelled them from the country. So it was definitely a good place to leave. And we don't know why they chose France, but that quote about France being a better place than other European countries is maybe one reason. Or they may have just thought that was a good place to transition to America. And my great aunt, Sarah, remained in France until her death in Auschwitz. Then the rest of the 4 out of the 6 went to Minneapolis, Minnesota. And I don't know, maybe they just like the sound of it, Minneapolis, Minnesota. I have no idea. There were 2 of them that stayed behind, Sarah, that I just mentioned, and Michel. Michel died with the French Foreign Legion, fighting for France in the French Foreign Legion in 1915 in World War I. But his son came to America and changed his name from Henri Feldman to Henri de la Fère. Quite a different sounding name. I just thought I'd throw this in. It has nothing to do with anything. There's nothing in the corner there. But all these paths of people coming and trying to find places to live reminded me of that. My grandfather was the last of the 4 out of 6 siblings who came to America. And this is the ship's manifest with our grandfather's name on it, and my great-grandfather. They traveled together. This was in 1907. So this is when my grandfather probably said goodbye to his sister, and that was the last time there was a meeting between those 2 families. So the quality of life for my great aunt, Sarah, in Paris pre-war. She was left. She was 12 years old. Her whole family had left, except for her brother, but this was her uncle. His name was Jacques Michel Feldman. And he was another one, besides Henri Feldman, to change to Henri de la Fère. He also changed his name from Jacques Michel Feldman to Jacques Michel. He used Michel as a last name. So this was a kind of a little bit of a theme. We believe that life may have been pretty good for her. You can see how she's dressed up in some pretty fancy clothes. Good. She married, this is her, she married this man, Marcel Gross, a wealthy pharmacist who owned his own pharmacy near the stock exchange in Paris, a very upscale area. If any of you have ever seen the Thin Man movies of Nick and Nora Charles, you can see they're very suave looking there. We know that Sarah liked to go and play the horses at the racetrack. So life was good. Why would you leave France at that time? However, that's not our French cousins theorized that she had been abandoned by the American cousins, by my side and the other second cousins in America. So we don't really know. We don't know if our family kind of left them behind and could have helped them get out of France before it was too late. This also will be on the final exam. But it kind of shows the quirkiness of these small little coincidences that lead to people living or dying. This is my great-grandfather. Interesting character. His wife, my great-grandmother, died in Romania. Never made it to Paris. My father told the story that he had 4 wives, and for one of them he said, "I divorce you 3 times," and didn't even bother to tell her. I avoided saying it 3 times because we'd be divorced if I did that, so I only said it once. And he killed himself, possibly because of a wife stealing his money, making him dirt poor, and what happened to Ben, my grandfather. My grandfather, Ben Feldman, was a grocer and a pawnbroker, and then he owned a speakeasy. We have a picture of him behind the bar during Prohibition. And he got arrested. He spent a year in Leavenworth prison. the famous prison for breaking prohibition. So I don't know if life in America was this paradise, but it seemed that life was better to us. It seemed like life was better in Paris. This is Dick and my father. He was a Cornell professor for decades, lifelong activist for progressive causes. She led a wonderful life, one of my favorite people. So now let's look at a little bit more about Sarah here. Sarah, during the beginning of the Nazi occupation, fled from Paris to the Vichy area, the Free Zone it was called. The north was the Nazi controlled, and this was still very much under the control of the Nazis, but things were a little bit easier for people to survive in that area. So she fled down there with her 3 children in a town called Brive-la-Gaillarde. Good. This is a very intense moment for us and the 3 of us in our trip. This is the house in Brive-la-Gaillarde where my great aunt Sarah was living when she got arrested. So this was pretty intense for the 3 of us, I think, to imagine that at this spot in 1944, the Nazis came to their door and took her away. We had assumed that she was turned in for being Jewish. You know, it almost seemed like, why would you bother even asking that? It turns out that's not the case. Our French cousins, who did an enormous amount of work looking up things and getting old pictures, they found this document that says that she was turned in by a French member of the Vichy militia. In other words, someone who volunteered to be on the Nazi-controlled militia. And she was turned in for helping the resistance, not for being Jewish. He got paid 200 francs, and his name and address are on this form. Sarah's children were between 16 and 26 years old, and they survived partly because they weren't home at the time, and partly because they weren't necessarily looking for that group of Jews at that time. They kind of went in waves. So the children survived, but the mother was taken away. So these 3 children are the parents of the people we met in France. Nicole, the one we had the dinner with that first day, it was her mother who was in the house at the time when her grandmother got taken away. So I feel like I'm not ruining the story for you. I hope I'm not. If I am, just write me some kind of nasty email and I'll say I'm sorry. Too bad. There's a lot I'm not telling you, but this doesn't take away the joy, I feel, of reading this story. This person here died in Palestine with the orange groves. He was very happy but very poor. Ephraim here desperately wanted to be French. His whole goal was to be accepted as a Frenchman. He kept applying for citizenship, and they kept delaying his citizenship. For instance, his son Jacques, they were going to have a bar mitzvah for him, but he said, "No, don't do that because it'll look bad to the authorities." Even near the very end, he kept hoping that if he acted as French as possible, they would accept him. So Miriam miraculously survived when they came for her brother and sister, and that's why the Leah and the author are alive, because she miraculously survived. I'll let you read how, when they came for her 2 siblings and her parents, why these 4 and not the 5th one. I'll leave that mystery for you. If you want to know, you can email me. And I'll give up the secrets if you want to read the story. Go back a little bit. Sorry. I'll read you a little bit of the part of the journey to the to the Vichy area. This is the Vichy area for the Books family. The Books family also went to the Vichy area. They had that in common. There's so many points of that in common between these two families. Here's a quote. The two young women left the apartment and walked to a side street some distance away where a car was waiting for them. Gabrielle was behind the wheel, smartly dressed and wearing a hat and driving gloves, looking stylish and resolute, as if she were about to compete in an automobile race in her Citroën Traction Avant with its 4-cylinder overhead valve engine. This car's back seat was completely taken up by a heap of bags and suitcases, surmounted by a pile of wrapped packages. Miriam spied some dark newspaper-wrapped shapes atop the mass, and protruding from them, of course, the heads of 4 dead crows. The sight was bizarre. I added the, of course, that wasn't in the book. She wondered where on earth she was going to sit among all that clutter, but then Janine glanced left and right to make sure the street was empty, free of pedestrians or any other cars. And with a quick movement, she shoved aside some of the bags, revealing a hatch in the back of the seat. Slip through here, hurry. Miriam realized that the seat had a false back, and the hatch led to the car's trunk. Janine had enlisted the help of an auto mechanic to equip her mother's car with a secret space, and now Miriam slid into it. Like Alice in Wonderland, she made herself smaller to slip into the trunk and curl up in the hiding place. But as she tried to straighten her legs a bit, she felt something move in the back of the space. Something alive. She thought at first it was an animal, but it was a man lying there, silent and still. Miriam couldn't see all of him, just parts. His bright, heavy-lidded eyes, the curve of his hairline, like a monk's tonsure, the cleft in his chin. The story of these crows and how they got through the checkpoints of the Vichy area are really quite interesting, quite amazing. There are a lot of moments like the one I just read. For the 4 that died, the details of the camps in the book are pretty intense. Noemi was quite a hero. What she did in the camps was really inspiring. But from my parents' generation on, life was good. You know, I'm fortunate that somehow through all this craziness that I was able to have such a fortunate life. Okay, next one. Let's just play a little bit. Listen to Nicole. You're not going to understand this, but go ahead. I don't know if you can hear it. Turn the volume up, Dick, on the upper.
Grand-père ne suivait pas en fait la religion et il ne portait pas les toiles.
Okay, that's enough. I'm not going to make you repeat this in French when you get home. So, this is just a few seconds of Nicole telling a story that her grandmother Sarah wore the Jewish star, the one who went to Auschwitz, but her husband, Sarah's husband, did not. He came to visit his family in the Vichy area. He crossed over the border into the Vichy area, but was stopped by the Nazis and held prisoner overnight. The next morning, he was released with apologies. This is the story that she's telling. The Nazis let him go because they decided he must be German. That's a good German name, Gross. But Nicole says that Gross is indeed a good German name, but it's also a Yiddish or a Jewish name. It's both. Okay, so go ahead. Next. The next section of the book is all about her kind of struggling with her cultural identity. So, to be Jewish, one part of being Jewish is by genetics. I'm 50% Jewish by genetics, for example. You can say Jewish means religion. I'm not at all Jewish by religion. And by culture, I think the first thing that came up was, of course, dill pickles. I spent a lot of time looking in Giant Eagle to find one little place way in the back where they actually have the real Jewish dill pickles. My grandfather was such a dill pickle fan that he gave a barrel of something like 5 gallons of pickles as a wedding present. Imagine coming to a wedding carrying 5 pounds of pickles. I let Dick yesterday try both those pickles and some standard store-bought pickles, and he absolutely preferred the real stuff. So I don't know. Am I Jewish? I don't know. My mother's not Jewish, and that means that I'm not really considered to be Jewish by the Jewish religion. I was standing in line at a Jewish restaurant in Paris, and this guy was coming along to try and convince people who were Jewish to come back to the synagogue. And when he found out that the half Jewish I was my father's side, he just said, "I'm not interested in you. You're hopeless. I have nothing to do with us." I've only been in a synagogue a couple of times. Another time, though, I was seen as Jewish, where I was in Jerusalem looking at the Western Wall, the most holy site in Judaism, and I was just standing there, and someone motioned me over, and I said, "Okay, I'll see what this is about." And before I knew what was going on, he had put a prayer shawl on me. He put a prayer shawl on me, and I was holding something, and they're all singing songs, and they were pointing to me like, "Sing along, come on." And after I was about done, I realized, oh, this was a bar mitzvah. And that I really shouldn't have been doing that, because you're supposed to, they needed a certain number of men to have a bar mitzvah, a certain of Jewish men who had had a bar mitzvah themselves, and since I hadn't had one, so I got to find that person and tell him he really didn't have a legitimate bar mitzvah. Anne's understanding of her ethnicity was challenged in this book. Her 6-year-old daughter said, quote, "Grandma, are you Jewish?" "Yes, I'm Jewish." "And Grandpa too?" "No, he isn't Jewish." "Oh, is my mom Jewish?" "Yes." "So am I Jewish too?" "Yes, you are too." "Okay, that's what I thought." "But why are you making that face, sweetheart?" She said, "I don't know. I don't like what you just said." "But why?" And she responded, they don't like Jews very much at school. So this kind of, Anne had been sitting on this postcard mystery for over 10 years. And when this incident happened, she said, okay, it's time to really start to figure out what happened. For her understanding of her ethnicity, she said, "My grandmother, the sole survivor of my family by war's end, never set foot in a synagogue again. For her, God had died in the death camps." So the author grew up without celebrating Jewish holidays or ever talking about her partial Jewish identification. However, there was a swastika put on their door at one point, so she couldn't really avoid it too well. Okay, let me read this. I see I'm running out of time. She says, I found myself confronted with a latent contradiction. On one side, there was the utopia my parents described as a model society to be built. She's talking about socialism here. Instilling in us day after day the idea that religion was an evil to be fought against. And then on the other side, hidden away in some dark crevice of our family life, was the existence of a hidden identity, a mysterious heritage, a strange lineage that drew its raison d'etre from the very heart of religion. We were all one big family, no matter the color of our skin or the country of origin. We're all connected to each other through our humanity. But in the midst of this enlightened discourse, there was that word that kept returning, circling back like a dark star, like some bizarre constellation, surrounded by a halo of mystery, the word Jew. And ideas began to fight with each other in my mind. Heads, my taste for any kind of male-transmitted legacy. Tails, the revelation of a Jewish heritage transmitted through the mother. Heads, the equality of all citizens under the law. Tails, the feeling of belonging to a chosen people. Heads, the rejection of any so-called inherent characteristic. Tails, an affiliation existing from the moment of birth. Heads, we were universal beings, citizens of the world. Tails, our roots lay in a world as unique as it was closed in on itself. How could I make sense of it all? From a distance, my parents' teaching seemed clear, but close up, everything seemed blurry. Okay. Back to the yellow square down there. I think I maybe need to skip here a little bit, running out of time.
Oh, you're not.
Take as long as you like.
Yeah? Okay. I only have about 5-10 minutes, maybe 10 minutes. Okay. My French family wanted to downplay their Jewishness after the war. This is my family. They feared another Holocaust. Roland, the one holding the mushrooms, said he didn't know he was Jewish or would be called Jewish until in 1959, when he was probably 12 years old or something. His mother took him to see the Diary of Anne Frank, and his mother broke down in tears and started telling him about their family history. This is similar to the book's incident of the 6-year-old girl asking if she was Jewish. My French family went even further than the book. They actually became Catholic after World War II. They got baptized even. But they didn't want to take the chance of another Holocaust. But today they're not practicing Catholics. My family, or our family I should say, had a much more gradual lessening of Jewish identity than the French side, rather than this sharp cut in World War II. My great-grandfather wore a prayer shawl and went to the synagogue every day. My father was less. Maybe he went to the synagogue once a week, and he was involved in Jewish socialist movements. Sorry, that's my grandfather. My father gave up the religion after he had a bar mitzvah and married a non-Jew, sort of the ultimate sin. However, my father maintained a deep interest in Jewish culture, and then for me it's much less so. And for Keith, what's that thing? What's that? You know, what's Jewish? I have no idea. So it's definitely descended gradually each generation. Okay. So we've organized Zoom calls. If you see here, this is my grandfather. This is the one who died in Auschwitz. But we had 4 other relatives, and this got us motivated to discover our other cousins. These are all descendants of these 4 are all in America. So we spent a lot of time searching them, and we had a Zoom call, or a couple of Zoom, maybe like 3 Zoom calls, with a whole bunch of these people of descendants that are all over the country, meeting at the same time with the French people. We had to have a French room and an English room when we were in Paris. You know, you choose which room you get into, and actually Zoom did translate it as we were talking. So we've created a WhatsApp group, and on the 15th of each month we try and get people to update their lives. We've also set a date in 2025 where we're going to have an equivalent of the party you saw early on in Paris, where we'll hope to have an equivalent of the party at the Dick and Beth's farmhouse in upstate New York. Some of these people here today are very much practicing Jews. In fact, one of them wanted to start one of our Zoom calls with a Jewish prayer. And Nicole here, the one who you saw the very first picture, really objected. She felt that the family was a non-religious family and shouldn't start with the Jewish prayer. So let me just give you some reasons to read the book. The writing style is wonderful. I read the book both in French and in English, and I think the English translation really holds up well. The mystery of the postcard is fascinating. The whole family history is deep and very engaging. The book starts from the early part of the 1900s and goes all the way up into the 2000s. So we've all heard about the Holocaust and 20th century European history, but reading these events in the context of a family really makes it come alive. For instance, the story about the Reichstag, the burning of the Reichstag, we've all heard that story. But to imagine yourself walking in Paris and have someone at that moment tell you, and you're sort of like not really believing it or not thinking it's going to be that bad. It has a lot to say about what's going around us today. Apparently, this book is particularly popular among young people in France. So some lessons for today. Immigration is one. Can we do better? They had a very difficult time, the Brooks family, even though they had a lot to offer. Our whole country is composed of immigrants, except for Native peoples. Go ahead. The importance of learning about your family. Do you know that much about your family? I didn't know much about my family before all this happened. I think my life has been greatly enriched by getting to know these people, the second cousins, and their children in the U.S. and France. It's been interesting to see where I fit in this large group. It's something to think about where you fit in if you do read the book. The path of your family through changes in religious practices and beliefs and ethnic practices. How has your family changed like our family changed over the time? Is it better to go back to those old traditions, or is it better to get rid of those and start new ones? That's something each of us has to answer. Incidentally, Anne Buress, the author, after going through all this, married a Jewish man and now is sending her daughters to a Jewish after-school program, even though she was not Jewish at all when this whole thing started. We need to challenge the dark side of anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, racism, sexism, and so on. That's, I was going to say that's particularly true today, but it's particularly true all the time. Yeah. I guess that doesn't mean much, particularly true all the time. Not saying much. Go ahead. So the criticism, I have just a couple of small criticisms of the book. One is, if you read this, you'll find it's confusing to know if the dialogue is in the past or the present. I read that the author thought it'd be fun to kind of mix the stories in, but at times it's frustrating to figure out who's speaking. And just a clue that if you see a dash, it's going from the ancient story to the mother and daughter, the detectives talking to each other. But that's one thing. It helped the second time through, helped me to figure it out. But I think you can figure it out if you just pay special attention. I don't believe in this about the amazing coincidences she considers to be more. She gives examples of where her children and her great aunts, for instance, went to the same school. She believes there's something more to that than just a coincidence. Go ahead. In the New York Times, the Haitian filmmaker Raoul Peck, who was known for the documentary I Am Not Your Negro, based on the unfinished James Baldwin manuscript. His quote was, "This book is totally researched, yet you don't feel the research in it." But it is sometimes difficult to know, is this something she made up? Or is it combined, real things made up or combined together? Or is it really well documented facts? The book really is well documented from what I've read. But she did do things like if she took them a week to do something, she compressed it to a day, things like that. So I believe I'm done. And just a second, if you'd like to discuss later on, we have some time for questions. But yeah, thank you for listening. Yes.
I read the first half of the French version yesterday, and I was struck by Ephraim's saying, "Nobody will know this is the 20th century. What are they doing with religion?"
Right. He kind of felt that religion would belong to some other long past time. Right. Very good. Anybody else have any questions or comments? Yes.
When you were talking about one of the characters living in France for a long time without becoming a citizen,
Yes.
and I was wondering about the situation of these migrants' children. Obviously, this is a whole other couple of hours worth, but one question is, does France have birthright citizenship as the U.S. does? And also, what is the procedure if you migrate to France? How do you continue to live there, and what's involved in becoming a citizen?
How do they live without citizenship? How do they survive? How do they get through the day? How do they have their children enrolled in schools? Things like that. Okay, well, let me just make a quick call to my French cousins. But yeah, I will actually call them and find that out from them. I don't know when they became citizens, or if ever. Yeah.
Larry, a quick comment about your question. A local person, Matt Ament, who is Sue and Don Ament's son, lives in France now. He's an actor, but his wife is a novelist, journalist, and TV personality. But he is applying for French citizenship. He's lived there for a while without, and I don't know about the procedures there. But the one thing he had to do for French citizenship, he had to go to classes, including one on French culture, such as he learned how to make a baguette.
That's great.
Fascinating stuff. And I think it really, sort of applies to how do you as a foreigner fit in. But
Yeah, that's great. Yes.
This is very far, but you mentioned one gentleman had 4 wives and then mentioning divorce 3 times.
Yes.
Makes it valid.
Yes.
I see some parallel that the Muslims adopted
yeah.
maybe from the Jewish culture.
Yes.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
Was that a Jewish religious law that you could divorce someone?
I believe so. Yeah. Yeah.
Why did you say I'm divorced with you? Like whatever.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I could try it and see if it works. No, I
We'll
definitely don't
carry
want
you
it.
out.
I've stuck with her for 40 years. I'm in her for life, so. She's wonderful. Sorry. Yes.
I was interested in the second half of the book, as well as the first, because she takes up the topic of, I guess it's called inherited trauma.
Yes.
Over generations, and she makes it very real to me. It's an emotional reaction at certain points to certain things, and the narrator has very visceral reactions. Still, at night, sometimes she wants to flee. You made reference to that, and I thought that was the first interesting representation of that inherited trauma that I had read.
Interesting.
Really interesting.
Yeah, I kind of grew up, or maybe in my 20s and 30s, I kind of thought, well, I'm sort of an independent person. What happened to my grandparents? I mean, they're maybe interesting to talk to for a few minutes or something, but I never really thought of myself as being part of this whole connected web. And that things that had happened in the past and how they impacted on me. My grandfather's decision to come with his father to America rather than stay in France, and certainly things like that. So many cultural traditions and decisions that have impacted me is something that I really got from this whole, reinforced from this whole experience. Anybody else? Thank you. Okay.